Hi, this is Steve Rigalucci, and tonight on Forgotten Mysteries, I have for you Before the Fact by Francis Iles. So this book was originally published in 1932 by A.L. Burt, but what I've got here is part of a reprint series. It was published in the 70s by a Boston-based publisher called Greg Press, and you can see on the back that this reprint series was edited by Otto Penzler, so one of the great critical names in mystery, detective, crime fiction. And I noticed that even some of these reprints are books that I have reviewed on this channel, including Rendezvous in Black by Cornell Woolrich and Fog of Doubt by Christiana Brandt. So my viewers may be interested to know that the reason I chose this book was basically because of your recommendations. I had put up a video a couple weeks ago in which I showed a bunch of books that I had bought while I was on vacation. This was one of them. I asked you all to vote on which one you might like me to read and review next, and this one was by far the winner. As I said, the Isles have it. So it wasn't like you really had to talk me into reading it, because I really wanted to read it. I'd heard nothing but amazing things about Francis Iles. I know his works are classic, but like so many of the classic writers, I had not read him before. And, you know, it is my goal to read all the greats before I die. I don't think that's possible. There are so many, but I'm sure going to try. So a little bit about Francis Iles, that it was a pseudonym. His real name was Anthony Berkeley Cox, and he was an Englishman. He wrote a few books under the Francis Iles pseudonym, and also wrote under a variation of his own name, Anthony Berkeley. His first book was called The Leighton Court Mystery, and it was an enormous success. And he had a lot of running success, really successful books, and then just sort of abruptly stopped writing mysteries in the 70s. So, you know, who's to say why? Maybe he ran out of ideas. Maybe he thought, okay, I've made enough money. Now I want to do other things. It's a bit of a mystery. And like so many of the authors that I discover or rediscover on this channel, you know, it turns out that he has a pretty storied history, in that he had served in the British military. He was wounded, had an honorable discharge, went into journalism and writing, and then went on to found the Dissection Club in the 30s with Agatha Christie and I had to write this name down. Oh, and Freeman Wills Crofts, whose book The Cask I have reviewed on this channel. So, you know, the early luminaries banded together to create one of the early associations of mystery writers. And Anthony Berkeley was one of them. And I notice whenever I mention his name, there's almost like a little bit of a bow to the people I'm talking with, because he is so respected and so accepted as a fine craftsman, a fine practitioner, and someone who was even sort of maybe breaking the rules just as they were being established, right? Just as that famous list of, you know, the Dissection Club had put together their list of their fair play rules for mysteries. The great writers were already starting to break them, like Agatha Christie in The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. But that's a topic for a different video. But I feel, after having read this book, that one of the things that made Iles so famous, continuing to this day, is not only his writing, but also all the things he did that were just not the norm at the time and that feel thoroughly modern. I read this book published in 1932, now in 2025, and it felt almost completely up to date for me, even though it also is a portrait of a time and a place, with England in the 1930s, along with customs and class and conventions and all those other things. Iles was great as a social observer, very shrewd, very critical in his own way. His observations are all sort of filtered through a lens of where he's describing everything, but he's not necessarily down with it, right? He's just kind of explaining the way it is, and knowing that his readers will understand what he is getting at. So before I get into the book, just a couple things I would like to mention are that this reprint version has an introduction by H.R.F. Keating, who's a very well-known English writer. It's always nice to see mystery writers writing about and paying tribute to other mystery writers. And then I had no idea of this before I bought this book, but it was the basis for the Alfred Hitchcock film Suspicion, starring Cary Grant and Joan Fontaine. And this book actually has a couple of stills from the movie, showing, kind of play up on that book-movie connection. And I'm a little snobby about books appearing to be an extension of the film based on it rather than the other way around. But my snootiness is kind of overcome by my feeling that anything that makes a book more appealing to potential readership is a good thing. And I'm sure a lot of film buffs really enjoyed seeing the movie stills in this book. So I want to read you, first let me just tell you a little bit about the plot. And I think I'm going to have to keep the plot details pretty limited because of the way this narrative works. I can't tell you a lot without giving away the secrets of the book. So just the basics are that our heroine, Lena Aysgarth, is married to Johnny Aysgarth, who is a very, very charming, handsome ne'er-do-well who is sort of the ultimate sociopath in his ability to charm and do whatever he wants and get other people to pay his debts and cover up for him because, like so many people in our society, he's good looking, therefore he can do no wrong, and, he is to be forgiven because beautiful people really can't make mistakes, right? They are perfection, and we must all admit that. And throughout the book, Lena is aware, and increasingly aware, that Johnny is doing some things, gambling and womanizing and having out-of-wedlock children and just, living a completely selfish lifestyle while Lena supports him. And she can deal with that, but she starts to believe that he is guilty of much more than just living a playboy lifestyle, that he actually is a murderer. And that's why I want to read you the very first paragraph of this book, because it'll give you a sense of how the book works. So here goes. Chapter 1. Some women give birth to murderers, some go to bed with them, and some marry them. Lena Aysgarth had lived with her husband for nearly 8 years before she realized that she was married to a murderer. Okay, so how is that for an opening paragraph to grab you by the throat and not let you go? The book really becomes about Lena's dawning awareness and her suspicions, hence the title of the Hitchcock film, and the question in her mind and in the reader's mind as to whether Johnny has crossed that line, where he has crossed the line from being just a gambler and a ne'er-do-well into actually killing people. And ultimately, of course, Lena has to ask herself the question if she is going to be one of his victims as well. So the story is told purely in third person, limited point of view through Lena's eyes. We see what Lena sees. And we're also given a very deep psychological portrait of this woman. And I think one of Iles's great accomplishments here is that, I guess in the days when psychology was kind of starting to become a little bit more of a thing in fiction, Iles really made Lena into a very complicated person who is a mixture of sympathetic and crazy making and annoying and self-aware and self-deceptive. She's a great character in her inconsistency. And I always feel like authors who do that are rather brave, because I kind of think a lot of readers expect characters to be sort of consistent, and they get mad when they're not. But human beings are inconsistent in their beliefs and their actions, and they say one thing and do another, or absolutely refuse to do something on page A that they end up by page B doing willingly. And Lena is exactly that type of person. And so you're traveling along the road with Lena, really trying to figure out whether her perceptions are accurate or not. And I have to say, I love books like that. I love books where the author is constantly shifting the ground under the reader's feet so that the reader doesn't know and may never know exactly what the truth is, which could lead to an unresolved ending, as is the case in this book. I don't think that's a spoiler to say, because I'm not giving you any details of the plot. Another thing that a lot of readers don't like is an unresolved ending. But in this book, it works extremely well. One of the things that really grabbed my attention about this book, and it was right there from the first sentence. I thought, wow, this is a book published in 1932. The very first sentence of the book refers to sex, right? Giving birth to murderers, going to bed with them, and marrying them. So you don't really think of 1930s England as being on the forefront of sexual awareness and sexual liberation and frank discussions about sex. But that is all in here. There's a lot of talk about sex. Lena and Johnny's sex life is talked about and speculated about. Lena seriously gives thought to taking a lover of her own, mostly as revenge. Mostly, her friends will say, well, your husband has fooled around on you, so you'll get back at him by having an affair. I don't know if that really works in real life. I suspect that it doesn't, but it sounds like a good idea. So she's actively thinking about taking him as a lover and about the sex they will have. The man she's interested in, Ronald Kirby, says to her, we should, before we decide if we want to be lovers, we should really, have sex a few times just to make sure we're compatible in that regard. Because, why bother to start off on this love affair if it's not going to be good in the sack. Again, the 1930s, I expect some people were scandalized by this. Puts me in mind of a similar situation in Downton Abbey, where Lady Mary decides to meet some dude in London for the sheer purpose of having sex so that she can make sure that they're compatible when the chips are down. And my God, I remember the scandal of that, how modern it is. So it was really interesting to view Iles's perceptions of the sexual workings of the different classes. And another thing that he did, which I really sort of marveled at, is making Lena's psychology as an adult very much a reflection of, or a progression of, her childhood experiences and growing up in her family. So, I'm not a psychologist. I edited plenty of psychology books, but I'm not. I don't have that, a degree in psychology. But I doubt that there are many of us who would say that our formative years do not greatly influence our adult lives. And our parents' treatment of us, and our siblings, and all those family dynamics. I mean, they really set up scripts and expectations and internal dialogues for the way you live your life. And what Iles does here is he gives Lena a sister, Joyce, who's a very cool character, very liberated, very modern, just sort of a pleasure to be with on the page. But in the house that they grew up in, there were identifications made that Joyce was the pretty one and Lena was the smart one. So it was always, about the beauty of Joyce and how she was going to get herself a great man because of her beauty, and really what else matters, right? She could get a wealthy man because she was so attractive. And Lena, well, Lena, you're not that great to look at, but you do have some family money, and you'll get a husband because of that eventually, but don't really expect him to be any great shakes, because what have you really got to offer him? Because you're not that great to look at. And the sad thing is that she is attractive, right? In her own way, like this whole word attractive or beautiful or pretty or whatever. It is in the eyes of the beholder. So some people strike you with their attractiveness immediately, and others, you sort of more discover their attractiveness as you know them or spend more time with them or look at them from a different angle or whatever. And so while Lena is attractive in a lot of ways, she doesn't feel attractive. And that leads her to behave in ways that really are kind of in sync with that kind of insecurity, right? She marries Johnny because he is so handsome, even though she knows that he only wants her money, because she thinks, well, this is the best I can do. At the same time, though, she's not just a shrieking violet. She's not a complete nincompoop, in that she understands that her husband relies on her money and relies on her to get him out of scrapes. And even though they never have children in this book, she kind of sees herself almost as a mother to Johnny, her husband, and that it's her job to keep him out of trouble. And like most mothers, she's sometimes indulgent of him and sometimes sharply critical of him. But she's not perfect. There's a part of her that likes kind of her dominance over him in terms of being able to rescue him financially when he gets it over his head with betting and and shady business dealings and so forth. And so she's completely cowed by him on one page, and on the next page she is pushing back against him. And sometimes it's right out there in conversations that they're having, but a lot of it is internal dialogue on her part. So really just a super character description in Lena and her dealings with her husband. And it goes much deeper than that as well, but I can't do it all justice in this video. But that's really the interesting thing in here. Two things is, one is Lena and the ups and downs of her relationship with Johnny and her tolerance of him, and then her growing fear that he is a murderer and what it all means for her and their life together and what people will think of them, and so forth. So that's one thing that Iles did really well. And the second thing is, I just could not put this book down. It grabbed me from the first page and just kept me turning those pages. I stayed up late most nights reading it. And well, I think it was maybe a wee bit too long, maybe about 20, 25 pages too long. I just felt that the suspense was consistently good. And I kind of felt like clammy hands were clenching themselves around my throat and squeezing tighter and tighter as we got toward the end of the book. Because even within a few pages of the end of the book, I was thinking, I've got like 5 pages left here. How is the author going to resolve all of this? And to figure it out, or to learn, you will have to read the book, which I definitely recommend. And I'm so grateful to the viewers of this channel for encouraging me to read it. What else can I say about it? I am now very interested in seeing Suspicion, the Hitchcock film, which I'm not a huge movie person. I don't know why. I often have trouble with the continuity. I can read a 1,000-page book or edit a 1,000-page manuscript, and I remember tiny details from the middle of the book. But with films, I don't know. Sometimes the neurons just don't fire. Particularly older movies, because I find the dialogue to be, stilted and not really truly representative of the way people speak now. So you feel like you're watching people, attractive people on a screen in beautiful settings saying words that aren't really, that don't really reflect the way people speak. But I'm still going to rent it one of these nights, and I understand that they changed the ending of the movie from the book, and so I'm going to have to see what I think about that. How often does that work out for the best? I don't know. I guess because my heart is more with books than with films, I think the book is always going to have a better ending. But I also remember my professor in college, my film professor, lecturing us about how a film and a book are two completely different types of media. They're judged by different standards. They're just different, and you can't expect them to be the same. So I will watch Suspicion with an open mind. So that is what I've got for you. Before the Fact by Francis Iles. Here it is again. The cover, not the greatest. I mean, it's so generic. It doesn't really do justice to the book. But the reading experience is excellent, and I hope anybody who has read Iles or any of his other books under any of his pseudonyms will feel free to comment below and share information and so forth. Before I go, I want to ask my viewers. See, I'm so used to working in books, I don't think in terms of the visual, even though I have this channel. I'd like to ask my viewers for a recommendation about a very specific thing. So I like a lot of genres. I couldn't make videos about all of them. I mean, talk about being totally overexposed. I would be like a Kardashian, right? The Kardashian of the book world. Although that might not be so bad for my income. But anyway, I really like graphic novels, and I've read some really superb graphic novels. I just get in the mood for a graphic novel every so often, and there's many of them, but it's just not one of those genres I know a lot about. So if any of you know about an original graphic novel that is a mystery, an original mystery that you can recommend, I would love to hear about it below. I have found graphic novelizations of mystery books. Like I have a graphic novel of Christie's Murder on the Orient Express. I read the book, I know what happens, so it's not as easy to, that almost feels more like a comic book than a graphic novel. But I'm very curious to know if there are true mysteries, true whodunits that are unique to graphic novels, where the graphic novelist has, created the plot and, done all the detection and done all that work in a graphic novel format. Because I would love to read an original, and I just don't know. I just don't know a lot about them. A lot of graphic novels to me seem to be either adaptations of written prose novels, or very autobiographical. I've read a bunch that feel very autobiographical, and often a little sad and depressing, even though they can be very good. And then a lot of the Japanese style books and superheroes seem to take up a lot of the graphic novel world. But again, it's not a world that I know a lot about, so I have a feeling I'm missing out. So any recommendations would be most welcome, because you guys certainly did not lead me astray with Before the Fact. You'll appreciate the title quite a bit after you turn that last page. It's a great title, and it really fits the book. And at the beginning, you have no idea what it means, and by the last page, you know exactly what it means. And so check it out. That's what I've got for you tonight, and I will be back next time with another, I hope, great book for you. Have a good night.